Good evening, friends. I welcome you to CSDS. Today we have with us Shri Ashok Gopal ji. Ashok Gopal ji has done a great service by writing this great book, Apart, uh, on the life and thought of B.R. Ambedkar. Uh, Ashok Gopal ji has been reading Ambedkar more than 10 years. He was a journalist by profession, and he also worked with NGO to develop curriculum and all that thing. But it's the most important thing is that he has written. There are written this such a great book. I heard many scholars, those are claiming that they have gone beyond Kher More and Kheer, but this is the real book which take you beyond Kher and Kheer and Kher More, even correct some of the information that Ambedkar himself given wrong. So with these few words, I welcome Ashok Gopal ji. He will speak around 40 minutes, and then we will take some questions from the audience. Okay, Ashok Gopal ji, please.
Thank you, Nishikant. I am honored to speak in front of this audience. Actually, I have a remote, a small association with CSDS. Years back, I had come with a friend and I saw your wonderful library. And that, in fact, it was in that context only that I asked you when you were in Pune, do you have any hostel facilities for people like me who would like to use your library? Yeah. So, but anyway, I'll get straight to the point because the time, we have to stick to the time limits. So my subject will be that I'm going to be talking about the Ambedkar archive, which I have used for my book. I can say that I have probably more than anybody else, I have used the archive most extensively so far. I mean, that is not just that's not a claim or anything. It's just I'm making it as a statement of fact. Because Marathi sources and many other sources which the previous writers had not used. So I'll be talking about specifically about that archive, but what I have to say, I think will have implications for research on other historical figures also. So I'll be touching upon some of the wider issues once in a while, but those are things that you can draw as a member of the audience also. I would like to clarify that although I say that I have used the archive extensively, it is not my claim that I have used every part of the archive in depth, because for the scope of my work, it was not required. But I will be even so highlighting all the parts of this Ambedkar archive. Also, I have to say that the archive is a continuing process. It is still being built. So what we are at one stage, and there is still work is right now as we are speaking. Work is going on somewhere or the other. So that will go on, and I will be talking a little bit about some of the work that needs to be done for people who are interested. So I will be using a PPT because there is a lot of information. So I'll be using a PPT, and there are some images also. So I will use a PPT. So I will go to share screen. The PPT has about 20 slides. I may go over some slides a little faster because given the time constraint, but the PPT will be there with you anyway. You can use it later. Right. So right now I'll go straight to share screen. Just give me 2 minutes. You can see this?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the Ambedkar archive, a biographer's view, and some parts of the archive you can see in the screen. There is a story to be told about each of these images. Time permitting, I'll go into depth about some of these images and what they tell and what they don't tell, because the thing about an archive is that as much as it discloses, it also, in a way, depending on how you use it, it can conceal also. So that is one of the things I realized through this effort of writing this book. So going ahead. 1 minute. Yeah. So what is the archive? That key topics will be what is the archive, what are the challenges faced in building this archive, who created it, where is it, what is its scope, limitations, and there is some politics underlying its use. So the archive has been archives are not ideologically neutral, and how you use it also is ideologically charged. So I'll be dwelling a little bit about that, and what is some of the ongoing work and areas for further research, right? So basically by archive, what I mean here is images, documents related to Dr. Ambedkar's life, his writings and speeches, and his public and professional career. By professional career, I mean that he also worked as a lawyer. I mean, that was his, apart from being a law minister and other official positions, much of his life he was a lawyer, and that was his livelihood. So all the documents and images related to that work. So all this archive, as we can call it, is in scattered locations with varying degree of access. This has to be highlighted because if you compare it to, let's say, the archive on Mahatma Gandhi, it is very, very easy to, if you want to get a basic understanding of Mahatma Gandhi and his thought and his life and all that, and his journals, it's all very easy to do. Sitting at home, you can, go to the Gandhi Heritage Portal and access a whole lot of information. Unfortunately for Dr. Ambedkar, we don't have such a facility, and that is one of the biggest problems that we face. And there is obviously a certain politics behind all this also. Why some archives are easily accessible and some are not. So what are some of the challenges faced while in making this archive? The basics are that Ambedkar did not write an autobiography, did not maintain a diary. As far as we know, he didn't maintain a diary. And there are no notes of his aides also, who worked with him. Later in life, he had some assistants in Delhi, and they have given some recollections, but they were not maintaining detailed notes. The kind of notes you can get when you are dealing with Gandhi, for example. Every day of Gandhi's life, public life, is documented every day. In Ambedkar's case, that we have huge gaps. Then there are very few records of his political movement, because when he started it, he was working out of two rooms in a chawl. He didn't have space, he didn't have secretarial assistance, and nobody, including him, was a full-time worker of that movement. And third, then we have this problem of that thousands of these papers were destroyed, first in 46 and then in 67. 46 was when there was some repairs going on in his house in Bombay, by which time he had shifted to Delhi. And 67 is after he passed away. Where his second wife Savita was living, the landlord tried to take over the house and many papers were thrown out. So what has been lost, we really don't know, but it is believed to include his correspondence and possibly manuscripts. So then the big problem is that there has been little state or university support. Actually, little is a euphemism. There has been no state or university support. A lot of money has been spent on Ambedkar memorials, but very little on, in fact, nothing on this archival work, which itself tells a story that, Ambedkar iconized is preferable to the establishment rather than Ambedkar's writings and thought being spread over to a large audience. The archivists who have worked have had their biases. That always comes into the picture about what you select and what you go into, what you search for, and what you don't. And as a result of all this, we have very poor cataloging, and there is actually no central database. I think my book the bibliography part could be like a starting of a database, because I have given copious references which could be used for other scholars. So these are the general challenges that have been faced with the Ambedkar archive, which continues even today. So who made the archives? It is basically the archive was made by Dalit admirers of Ambedkar. C.B. Khairmode was his first biographer, and Bhagwan Das, who worked with him in Delhi. Vasant Moon, who was from Nagpur. Ramesh Shinde, who was in Bombay. Ganjare and Ganvir were both lecturers. Shankarrao Kharat was associated with Ambedkar for some time, and Mr. Surwade, and there are others also. So Ganjare, Ganvir, and Surwade actually had never met Ambedkar. They are after Ambedkar, they started building this archive. And this has gone on for over 100 years, because Khairmode started interviewing Ambedkar in the early 20s. So now it's about 100 years since this archive has been built. There were some significant contributions, particularly by Eleanor Zilliot, who did the first PhD on the Ambedkar movement. She interviewed many of the people, Ambedkar's associates, who were alive then. None of them are alive today. There are no Ambedkar associates around, but she could get that. She tapped that source. That's a very important work that she did, and some other documents that she could access from the British archives and all that, which she shared with people in India. So state effort has been limited to this Babasaheb writing and speeches, which has been published from 1979. That's about all. And the contribution of Savarna scholars to this whole archive is negligible. It's only in the last few years that you see there have been some additions been made. But otherwise, remarkably, Savarna scholars have just not contributed. They have done studies on Ambedkar, but they have not done any primary research. So what does the archive contain? It contains a lot of things. It has texts and writings. This is the main part of speeches in English and Marathi, including some incomplete, unpublished writings in English. There is memoranda, proceedings of legislative and constitutional bodies, press reports in English and Marathi, correspondence, Dr. Ambedkar's correspondence in English and Marathi. The multi-volume biography in Khairmode is also can be considered a primary source, because Khairmode gives a lot of documents which are not available in other places. And of course, Khairmode gives the reports of what he spoke to Ambedkar about in the 20s. That also we can't get from anywhere. There are official papers, police reports. Then there are recollections of Ambedkar, his aides, his son, and women activists. That is also there. That work was done in the 80s. So people who were in the Ambedkar movement. Actually, of the male activists, you don't get these oral narratives, but you do have of the women activists. Then Ambedkar's own books with his annotations, which have been a source of study for many scholars. Court papers relevant to the movement, and as well as court cases that he fought as a part of his livelihood. So we have photographs, we have records, some sort of records of institutions founded by Ambedkar, particularly the educational institutions. And then there are some miscellaneous documents like school and university records. So if you look at where this whole thing is there, it is basically, one is about the books that were published, written by Ambedkar himself, that were published in his lifetime. Apart from the text of the books, the introductions have important pieces of information. For example, Annihilation of Caste, the first part, he talks about how the text got written. So that is there in the introduction. Similarly, Pakistan, the introduction tells you how the text got written. So there is, information in these. Apart from the value of the text itself, the other portions are also useful. Then there are many collations. We can call them collations, because they are basically writings which have been put together by Bhagwan Das, Ganjare, Ganvir, Kharat, Surwade, and others. These are of different nature. Like, for example, Ganvir's was the first collation of Ambedkar's journalistic writings in Marathi. Ganjare's was the first collation of Ambedkar's, comprehensive collation of Ambedkar's speeches. Bhagwan Das collation of Ambedkar's speeches in English. So like Kharat has a collation of autobiographical recollections of Ambedkar. So these are different kind of collations that are available. Khair Mode's 12-volume biography, of course. Khair Mode papers. When he was alive itself, these were taken and kept in a place in the Bombay University Library. There is a sort of a room there where you can see these papers. Then, of course, all the proceedings of the BLC and BLA, that is Bombay Legislative Council, Legislative Assembly, Constitutional Assembly of India, Rajya Sabha, India Office records. But more than the India Office records, relevant for us are all the reports of the constitutional reform committees where Ambedkar was involved. And those reports are available. For those reports, you don't have to go to India Office records. They are now available from public archive sources, also internet archive sources. I got them, for example, from Gopal Institute Library. All the reports are there. Then Vasant Moon collected a large number of papers which were in his house, and then they were donated to Nagpur University, and they are. I have not seen that collection in Nagpur University, but I have heard that this collection has now been shifted. So all this, what you see on top, is actually what makes up these volumes of Babasaheb Ambedkar writings and speeches. I mean, there is nothing in this which is not there above, in the above points. So there are about 30 volumes if you include the multi-part volumes, 21 in English, 5 in Marathi, 1 photobiography, and there are 3 volumes of source materials. So press and police reports and his Marathi journals. Then Dr. Ambedkar private papers are there in National Archive. As I mentioned in my book, it's not a very well catalogued and this thing, it's just, something somebody has, some clerk, it looks like has got together and catalogued it. It's not even in chronological order. There are, of course, newspaper archives. The English language newspapers are easily accessible, whether it's Bombay Chronicle, Times of India, New York Times, or British newspapers. The regional language newspaper archives are very difficult to access because we don't have digital access for many of these papers. But English language is available for use. We have recollections by many people who are close to Ambedkar, and so there's particularly a special issue of Ambedkar's journal called Janata, which has a lot of recollections of people. This was done in 1933. Then Ramesh India and Vijay Survadi India Home, they have collections of papers, which we can call private collections. Then there are his collections of books, Ambedkar's collection of books in Siddharth College, in Milind College, with colleges he founded. Then there's Symbiosis Memorial in Pune, and Rajgriha, that is his house in Dadar. There are records of Columbia University, which has now been recently extensively used by Scott Stroud. So that is there. London School of Economics records are available in public, and they have put it online. Mumbai University, some records of use are there because he was a member of the Senate, and he was also an examiner for LLB students or LLM students, I think. Then there are records of the Labor Department, which was headed by Ambedkar. These have been sourced by Sukhdev Thorat, and a publication. There is a useful publication of the Water Resource Ministry from the 90s. It has been recently reissued. All these records which relate to Ambedkar's work in water and electricity policy. Then there are miscellaneous records. Collected works of Mahatma Gandhi also is useful. Jaikar papers, which Ambedkar was in quite good touch with Jaikar, so Jaikar papers are useful. Mountbatten papers are useful because, again, Mountbatten and Ambedkar, I realized while researching for this book that Mountbatten and Ambedkar got along very well, and they were friends and mutual admirers also. Some biographies of contemporaries. Nehru's biography doesn't tell you anything about Ambedkar. There is nothing there. Nehru's, sorry, the word should be autobiographies, not biographies. Nehru's autobiography is silent on Ambedkar, but there are other people like, for example, Thackeray, that is our Bal Thackeray's father, who knew Ambedkar, and so there are, from Ambedkar's early public life, you get a lot of information in that autobiography, and a few records of institutions like this, the Hitakarni Sabha and People's Education Society. So what is available in the public domain are his recollections of his early life. Some 4 short autobiographical pieces are there. In some speeches, he has autobiographical recollections. Then there are a few letters of his, I'm talking of his related to his personal life. So there are letters to early associates, family members, Edwin Seligman, his professor in Columbia, Shah Maharaj. So where there are personal issues being discussed in these letters. A lot of information has been gathered about his father, about his brothers, about his wife, first wife, by Dalit archivists. Then information on courses taken on in Columbia University that has been extensively studied. There's an LSE file on Ambedkar, photos of him as a university student. And there are odd bits of information like, on the properties he owned and his failing health and things like that. Letters to Bhaurao Gaikwad, his close associates, Savarna associates. A few letters from his friend in London who was called F. She's a sort of a mysterious woman. We don't know much about her. But there are about 60 letters from her that we know of, but out of which about 6 are available in public domain. The rest have, there was some move to have the letters published, but that was resisted. So we don't have access to those other letters. His second wife, Savita, has given a lot of recollections, and there are a few letters of Ambedkar to Savita, which are published in her autobiography, which are really revealing letters about his loneliness and about his, these are very personal letters, which Savita held on for a very long time. But around the 70s, she agreed to give it to Mr. Surwade, and then he used it in her autobiography, which was first published in 90, and now a recent edition has come in English. So what is not available is, of course, there is no official birth record, which is not surprising on that time. But the thing is that his birth date, he himself said, is nobody can be sure about his birth date. And what we assume as his birth date is something that is found in school records. But he himself joked, or maybe half joked only, that nobody could be sure about when he was born. Different years are given in different documents. There is, we don't know really much about his siblings, his sisters particularly. About Ramabai also, the information is very little. There were 4 children who died early. We don't know. We know only about their names. We don't even know the birth order. We don't have any early photos. We have no record of his interactions with anybody in Columbia, except Seligman, his professor, and Bathena, his friend. But that's very little sort of, In LSE, it almost looks as if he didn't have any interaction with any other student because there are no recollections of others. We don't know very little. We know very little about his professional career as a lawyer. He would have certainly written to F because in her replies, there is reference to letters from him, but we don't have his letters to her. We don't know. We have as I told you, we have very little information about her. We again interactions with friends in Mumbai. He had friends are mentioned, but about those interactions. In Delhi also there he had friends. We know the names of those friends, but now of course it's many years since they've all passed away and nobody cared to catch them and take some oral history records from them. So now that is all probably gone for good. And we don't even have a catalog of all the books that he referenced, which is very important because he used other people's writings in a very deliberate and unique way. But so all the books that he referenced, we need to have a catalog. This can be, of course, done quite easily, but right now it's not there. What we have are all the press reports on all the key events of his movement. There are, as far as public life is concerned, we have the full text of many public speeches, not all. We have, he had two journals, periodicals that he himself wrote, out of which the first one we have only 6 out of 12 issues, but the Passcode Bharat, the second we have all issues. And then Samta, Janta, Prabuddha Bharat, we have some issues. These were not written by him, but by his colleagues. We have all the memoranda, the speeches, the books published in his lifetime, parts of income, unpublished writings. Again, we have records of correspondence on some events, like Nasik Satyagraha, Yola Declaration, SCF, Dhamma Diksha in Nagpur. We have importantly records of discussions with Gandhi before the Pune Pact in Mumbai and London, which I have used extensively in my book. And there are records of correspondence, some records of correspondence with Jaikar, Churchill, Vallabhbhai Patel, Nehru, and a few others. Legal documents of the Chowdar tank case and some other cases handled by him. Some information on colleges started by him. Not available is that, the early activities of the Bahiskrit Hitakarni Sabha, what kind of discussions he had with his colleagues, or later when he decided to form the Independent Labour Party, what discussions were held. The decision to join the Nehru ministry, he would have certainly talked about this to some other people, but we have no records of that. We have no record of two manuscripts which Kermode says were written, prepared by him. One was some early studies in the early 20s, studies in history, economics, and law. Kermode mentions this, but that manuscript has not been traced. We know he was working on a book on the British Indian Army that also has not been traced. He wrote letters to readers of Janta that has been published in Marathi, that we have. But he had written the letters in English. The original letters are not available. There is a part of his speech on Ranade Gandhi and Jinnah, which had a section on Jyotirao Phule in the published version that is not there. We don't have the original copy of Riddles in Hinduism, which he had prepared for printing, for press. What is now available is something that has been put together from the papers that were found. He had prepared a copy for printing that we don't have. There is an early version of Buddha and his Dhamma. This version is available in a few places, but it is not in public domain. Buddha and his Gospel. It is for reasons, again, you can imagine why it is not in the public domain, this early version. The name itself tells you gives you some kind of a hint. Then there are these lost manuscripts of correspondence about which we can only speculate. The records of conversation, the important part, when before the Pune Pact, he met Gandhi in Yerwada Central Jail under the mango tree. The mango tree is still there, and there is a board there. You can go. I think the court is also kept. Not that court. Some court is there, so you can imagine that scene. But what exactly he spoke to Gandhi at that time, we don't know, because they spoke in whispers or private, so to speak, and the others were sitting at a distance. We have only some snatches of that conversation. This is really quite a loss for us because, it appears that on the basis of that conversation, Ambedkar came to certain conclusions about how the Congress would act and what Gandhi would do. Because that you get that feeling that, and Gandhi also refers to some things that Ambedkar told him during that conversation, but we don't have that full record of that conversation. And they spoke for a very long time. The British officials had put a condition that whatever was spoken could not be released to the press, and Gandhi could not issue statements and all that. So those conditions were there, but at a later time, somebody could have just given the transcript of their conversation, but we don't have that. So he had submitted a memorandum to Vallabhbhai Patel in 46. We know about that memorandum. He modifying the SC reservation. He gave some options. We get an idea of those options from the letter he wrote later to Patel. But that actual memorandum, many people have tried to hunt for it. They have not found it. And as far as the Constitution of India is concerned, there would have been a lot of behind-the-scenes discussions on many critical areas. So about that also we have no records. So these are significant gaps that we have to work with. Okay. The other general limitations that we actually have no detailed authoritative chronology of Ambedkar's life. The available chronologies have a lot of mistakes. Of course, this omission is now going to be filled by Mr. Surwade, hopefully in this year. But so far we have been suffering from that lack. The boss writings are not organized chronologically or thematically, so it's really a pain to go search for Ambedkar's thought on particular topics. Now this has been partly sort of solved by the website boss.in, but even there you will face the same problem in the sense you will be able to quickly go to some text, but you will not get it. You will not get the search results in chronological order as you get for in case of Gandhi. This might seem like a small technical point, but I really face this difficulty a lot, so I put it here. Boss has significant omissions. There are letters to some people which are there in National Archive, but have not been included in Boss. The only reason seems to be that those were people who later moved out of Ambedkar's circle. In fact, they became close to the Congress. So only for that reason, Ambedkar's letters to them appears to have been omitted. There is no general index also, of course. There are some all kinds of unverified recollections about Dr. Ambedkar. I can tell a few of them if we have the time, but some of them are patently fake. There are all kinds of fake recollection. One that has been sort of circulated a lot is about Savarkar's lawyer meeting Ambedkar in the Gandhi murder case in Delhi, and Ambedkar meeting at some remote place in Delhi and telling him that no, nothing is going to happen to your client. The whole thing is so bizarre. Firstly, Ambedkar would never go to some remote place to meet somebody. Okay, he knew that lawyer anyway, Bhopatkar. He knew that they go a long way. And the most bizarre thing of that story is that Ambedkar is supposed to have gone in his car, driven himself, and gone and met this lawyer in some remote place on Mathura Road or something like that. Now that is completely bizarre because Ambedkar did not know how to drive. I mean, you may as well say that Ambedkar went on a horse and met that lawyer on Mathura Road. This is as bizarre a story. But these bizarre stories are published. These bizarre stories are published and recycled. The personal collections of papers that I mentioned, they are not open to the public. You have to, approach the persons concerned. And so there is a difficulty there. And the safekeeping of this, what will happen, that is a big issue. There are a lot of papers and, there is no plan, it seems, on the future safekeeping. And of course, English translations of all the Marathi texts are not available. That is a big issue. Okay, so now I'll come to the most interesting part of all this is that how the archives can be used and misused. And I'll just talk about a few of the points. But meanwhile, Nishikant, you can tell me how much time we have? 10 minutes?
10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Because there's a lot to say about each of these, but I'll keep it short. Yeah. So the first is about the story of these two photographs. This particular point was actually brought up by a person in the audience during the function held in Delhi related to my book's launch. And he said, why is it that, Ambedkar, you always see these stern photos, whereas in Gandhi and Nehru, you have the very nice and they are, you can see warm between them and all that. And Ambedkar appears as a very stern kind of figure. No, at that particular point, I couldn't quickly come up with a proper answer, but I thought about it a lot later. And so it's quite interesting, so it's like this. See, one thing is that that this photograph that I'm pointing out here on the right is quite misleading. It's misleading in the sense, of course, they were close to each other and they shared a lot of jokes. But so did Ambedkar with a lot of people. But we also know that there was a huge divide between their ideas on many, many fundamental issues. On that point, actually, the person on the left here has a lot more in common with the person here, especially when the Constitution of India has been made. So how come we form this kind of image, and about Ambedkar, we have this stern image. So it turns out that basically all these photographs, the photographs that you see on the right, were taken by, most of them were taken by Western press photographers. And including this one, which is a very famous photograph. So these were like, for example, the lady who comes in Gandhi as a character herself, the photojournalist who comes in the Gandhi film, Attenborough's film. So she was one of them. So these were photojournalists who, like that particular photojournalist was for Life magazine. And their brief was to take candid photos. candid photos. And they use small cameras, 35 mm cameras, and they had to take candid photos. And that candid photography started from 30s or earlier, and a lot of candid photography was done in India. But being Western journalists catering to a Western audience, they went only where to people like Nehru and Gandhi. So you don't have any candid photos of Ambedkar. So Ambedkar's photos were all taken by studio photographers who used these old, big, huge studio cameras with glass negatives with long exposure time. So the person has to sit still and should not smile, etc. So this sorry. Yeah, so this is the basic difference. In the sense, after all, we know from many recollections of his associate that Ambedkar also had a great sense of humor. He used to crack a lot of jokes. He used to mimic people. I mean, of course, he was not like a humorist or something, but neither was Nehru. So, but still, because of the kind of images that come before us, we form such impressions. So that is just, I thought this requires, of course, a lot more analysis and study of how photographs can give us lead us to construct misleading narratives. This is a headline of the Bombay Chronicle just after the Pune Pact. It clearly tells you that it clearly goes against the standard narrative of Ambedkar agreeing to a pact against his wishes and being quite bitter about it, etc., etc. So now how have people dealt with this particular report? I have seen two ways that people have dealt with it. One is the best way, so to speak, is that you ignore it. You ignore such headlines. And the second is that people have said that, Ambedkar was just being nice and on that occasion. As anybody who has read and studied Ambedkar would know, he was the last person to be nice just for the sake of being nice. I mean, he was very blunt always. And at times when he would rather keep quiet than say something just for the sake of being nice. So there were important occasions in his life, for example, that after Gandhi was killed, Ambedkar kept silent. He didn't issue any statement. So he was not a person to make such statements, just like that to make people happy. And if you go further a little later, as I did, and after 3-4 days later, there's a news report where he's addressing his own audience, his own community, and he talks about the Pune Pact as a great achievement. That, so, I mean, he did speak critically of the pact later, but the point I'm making is that came later. But immediately he welcomed it. This is and you have to just follow his words, and not just say what if you assume that he always spoke his mind, then this report and the reports that follow give us a clear story which people have been trying to duck. Okay, this is a famous letter, part of a famous letter which has been partly cited for a long time from in Kir. Kir uses a part of this letter, which is Ambedkar's letter to Savarkar. The first part of the letter, which I have not shown here, has Ambedkar praising Savarkar for his work. And that is the part that Kir uses. And on that, a narrative has been built by Kir about Ambedkar and Savarkar being, very close to each other, etc., etc. I always thought it was a bit suspicious, but later from digging, it found out that Kir has used only half the letter. The other part is the one that is below. That is that, that I am very, it's unfortunate that you are still using the jargon of Chaturvarna, and though you qualified by basing it on merits, that is rather unfortunate. I hope that in course of time, you will have courage enough to drop this needless and mischievous jargon. And subsequently, I mean, Savarkar did not show any such inclination, and Ambedkar's correspondence with him on this issue ends. So this is about part use of letters. Then finally, this is about the letters to Bhaurao. Bhaurao Gaikwad is one of his close associates. Now, this is one of these early letters. Now, these letters were available to the government of Maharashtra's committee since 1987. Since 1987, but they were published only in 2006. Why did it take so long? I mean, there's a story there. I won't go into that, but people have been sitting on material also is what clearly emerges. Here, this letter also has two interesting. The first part is about the political movement related. The second part is about a legal case that Ambedkar is pursuing, and he says, the client is asking for waiver of charges, and this Ambedkar says, well, look, I am not into that kind of social service, but I mean, if he is really deserving, I should be satisfied, then I can consider something. So you have these letters where in the same letter you will have the political and the personal. And all sorts of charges against you is a much later letter where Ambedkar talks about charges against Gaurav Gaikwad, which has come to his years. And what those charges are and all that have not been explored by biographers. I have found out what it was all about, but since it was not in part of my book, I have not gone into it. But so there is the archive reveals, but then it is not pursued. That is what comes out from these kind of evidences. So ongoing work, there's a detailed chronology that is being done. All the court cases fought by him. There is already one work, but a better work is coming out. Official papers on Nashik Satyagraha will also come out by Mr. Surwade. You can see in the middle, that is his collection all around him. Piche, that's only part of it. There's a lot on this side of the room. And this particular book, which is by Dr. Chowre, I'm sorry, he was a retired chief judge. So he has collected all the court cases related to the Chowdar tank case, and he is the person who's doing these, collecting the papers about Nashik Satyagraha, etc. And areas for further research are, all the local activists that were there. Many names are mentioned. Of course, now it will be very difficult to get information about them, but from their family members, at least some information is possible. His work as a law teacher has not been explored. Press reports and cartoons have been covered, studied, yes, but not much work has been done about the regional press coverage and the cartoons in regional press. So then also not much, hardly any work has been done on how his writings were disseminated in different languages during his lifetime. Like Annihilation was translated in the 30s itself. So, but that has not been studied. In fact, I have not been able to get a proper story of how Annihilation was disseminated in Marathi. I could not get that. Then there are, of course, correspondence with other leaders, apart from the ones I have mentioned, British officials and professional colleagues. This can be, I mean, it's not there in the National Archives, but it will be there somewhere else. So this can be traced. The organization and activities of the Scheduled Caste Federation has been covered by Gail Ombet, and she has the references she gives are useful, but there is more to be done, especially about the SCF in Punjab and there were SCF candidates from Himachal and such places who won in 52. So in the assembly elections. So we need, sorry, in 57. So but we don't have any information about the organization of those units. And lives of family members remains, especially about the lady in the right, Namabai, about whom we know very little. Even associates, some Savarna associates like Sahasra Buddha, a very important person. He was the person who was standing in front of the pit when the Manusmriti was burnt. But we actually know nothing about it, apart from his name. It's, like Mrs. Urvade and others have really gone into it, but they have not found much. So I'll finally conclude with this photograph of this library, small library in Pune cantonment, which is very close to my heart. This is where I found most of the materials in Marathi. The photograph on the right shows the shelves, The right side shelves are children's books. The left side shelves are all, the three shelves are all Dalit and Ambedkar literature. So this is secondary literature mostly, but also Khairmode's biography, the first edition, and so this is the material that I actually drew me into Ambedkar study, my Ambedkar study. And this material was built by this person here whose photograph you see, Ganpatra Pawar. You see his photograph. He built this in 1950. He was an employee of the PWD, and he used to collect these materials, and he used to go on a cycle distributing this material to Dalit families in Pune cantonment, telling them that, you read this material, next week I'll come and collect it from you. So this is the kind of work that has been done by people on which people like us are riding on. And without that work, I don't know how much we would have been able to get about Dr. Ambedkar's life and work. So this library is behind the Pune cantonment, behind the non-vegetarian meat market. I stumbled upon it accidentally, and it has of course, a very relevant name, Siddharth Library, and it is also one of the first purchasers of my book. So with this, I have to say thank you to everyone. I do hope that you buy the book apart. I am not here to promote it. I am here to say that, just 2 points that, we can't be we can't have half knowledge about Babasaheb Ambedkar. And we can't afford to be ignorant at all, of course. In any field of humanities, if you are an Indian, you have to know Ambedkar. And my effort has been to give you a comprehensive picture with a lot of references that will be useful. So my plug for my book is based on some, not based on some monetary interest. It is, I genuinely believe that people should read Ambedkar. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashok Gopal. It was very enriching, very descriptive, detailed. Even some of the archive you mentioned, I think, will be useful for me also. I have some question, but I think I first take question from the audience. And if they have any question, they can raise their hand and they will be upgraded. And they can directly ask question to the speaker. Please raise your hand if you have any question. Yes, what is sure? And someone, please upgrade him. What is his name? Yes, Saksham, please ask. Saksham, unmute and please ask.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to just wanted sir to reflect upon when about the general narratives that are formed, which are when we go into the depth, we do not find them true. For example, the general narrative about when we read anything from Ambedkar's perspective, suddenly Gandhi ji is shown as a villain. So about these general perceptions, that is it like, how can we go about finding whether they are true or not, and how does one negotiate between how to find out that what's true and what's not, when how these things go ahead.
Yeah. So for starters, you could start by reading apart. you will many of the narratives have been unpeeled. So that is a start. I mean, it is a job of a historian and a researcher to deal with these narratives and not perpetuate it. I mean, this is analyze them, and some narratives may be valid. So it is, I don't think for a lay reader, it will be quite a task. It is the job of a responsibility of a scholar and a historian to do such things. I have tried to do it, and many of the narratives that you are mentioning, I have sort of unpeeled it. It is not that all the narratives are completely false. It is like there's always that Adha Sach, Adha Jhoot kind of business. Yeah. So for starters, you can read my book. Yeah.
So next is Ananya Vajpayee, my colleague. She's Ananya ji, please ask. What happened?
Can you see me or hear me? I
Yes, we can hear you, but can't see you. But that's fine. Yeah. Now we can see you also.
But we can't hear.
Okay, now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That better?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just adjusting the controls. Thank you, Mr. Gopal. I'm sorry I couldn't be there today, but I've listened to your whole talk, and I couldn't agree more with your account of the difficulties of accessing the materials, of finding them, of putting them in any kind of chronological order, and of the fact that a lot of things are unaccountably missing or misplaced, or not necessarily very reliable. And we heard a very similar sort of set of complaints from Akash Rathore just a few days ago at the center, and also from Scott Stroud, who came just before that to CSDS. I was just curious, and I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to read your book yet, although I have it. I was just curious, you mentioned in the beginning, and maybe you discussed this in the book, but you mentioned that that the lacunae in the archive are not necessarily ideologically innocent. You said something like this, that there are reasons why certain kinds of information is not available in the public domain, or it's not organized, or it's not presented in a manner that allows people to freely and fairly access it. Could you give us a sense, and of course I'm sure this is there in detail in your book, but could you give us a sense, or could you give us an example? Like, for example, you said the Buddha and his Dhamma, or the gospel of the Buddha, etc. This is, the introduction, etc. is missing, and we can imagine why. Now, I can imagine why, because I know a little bit about this and about his views on the Four Noble Truths, for example. But have you encountered some sort of systematic set of obstructions? Are they coming from one ideological source? Is there a reason why, of all the leaders of that time and all the intellectuals of that time period, Ambedkar in particular is so difficult for us to put his life together as historians or as biographers? What is your feeling about this?
Yeah, the reasons for him not being for there not being an Ambedkar state-funded Ambedkar archive are pretty obvious, in the sense somebody who's so was so vigorously critical of the nationalist movement, the Congress, and the Hindu religion is a tough one to you. You need a very, very liberal kind of state to sponsor that kind of a thinker. And so that and that is number one. Secondly, there is not much of a constituency that is demanding that such an archive should be there. That is also there, right? Constituency that is because for many people it is better that Ambedkar is just a statue and a photograph, and an iconic figure has probably greater immediate political value than a figure like that we need to study. So that is as far as the establishment is concerned. As far as the Dalit movement itself is concerned, even in Ambedkar's time there were rifts towards the end, and those rifts have carried. And later, of course, after he passed away, there were the RPI split into so many factions that I was a journalist. We used to joke that whether the leader knows which faction he is in. So yeah, so then, and these are, so who's of which faction, who's there in the committee is very important. That makes the difference of what is in and what is out. And there is a third part also that which I have heard is that so it works both ways. For a community marginalized for centuries, gets a figure who is all the hope is vested on that figure. It cannot probably afford an image which is it needs an idealized image. I mean,
yeah.
I mean,
I understand. Yeah, I understand that.
I mean, the sense I have said this because I have had this conversation with some of the archivists and says, see, you people can. It's not going to make any difference to you people if Gandhi is some facts about Gandhi or Nehru come out. It's not going to make any difference to your lives or anybody's lives. Aapko to chalte hi wala hai. Plus, it's a lot. No? I mean,
sorry, I just.
I mean, I think. I mean, it is to be taken into account. This view.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Sorry, Nishikant, just one little follow-up.
Yeah, please.
So I understand that there are different interests at work, and there's also an abdication of the responsibility of the state in giving Ambedkar the prominence that he deserved. And I understand also that there are sensitivities, especially in the community, because it matters, as you're saying, and it makes a difference to people's lives. Now, my only question, which I've never found a satisfactory answer to this, is that if we were to imagine a world in which everything about Ambedkar that could be known became known, do those records even exist still? Are they somewhere there in safe hands? Can we assume that as time passes, they will come to the fore? Or are they genuinely, you think, destroyed or lost? Or have they been sequestered in a way that we can never hope to see them?
No, I think what is available is adequate for us to, and that can be put in one place, organized well and all that. What is available? I mean, it will take some effort. It will take some doing. It will take some money, and it will require institutional backing. But it can be done. What is available is it's not bad. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, some things have gone forever, but then so it is about Marx, and so it is about probably Gandhi also. Some things have gone forever.
Right.
Maybe there were some early Gandhi writings we don't know. So, but what is available? I mean, it's not some colossal loss, the gaps. Except I say, like for example, I thought the piece on Jyotirao Phule, it would have been very important because Phule is he's part of that tradition, and he narrates that And, there is a history. He comes with a history which people in other parts of India did not have. And he benefited from that. He was aware of that. So even if it was just one paragraph on Phule, that would have been very useful. But right now, we don't even have one paragraph. That I thought was a big loss. About the other things, like, for example, his letters to F, if it's not there, it's okay. What do they? I mean, it is past. People have private lives. I mean, to me, that is not a big thing. That is.
My question was more about, for example, are there actually books in Rajagriha that are not, that you can't see when you enter as a member of the public? Because I remember when I went, you just saw some empty rooms with photographs in them, but I couldn't see any actual books, solid books there.
The maximum books are in Milind College.
Yes, that I've seen.
Yeah, you can.
Art College also you can see.
Yeah.
But in Rajagriha, where he's supposed to have built his personal library,
There are very few. Not.
where are those books?
No, they were shifted to Siddharth.
I see. So it's not that they are hidden in some
No.
other.
But in Siddharth also, they are around many places, in many shelves.
Yeah.
And I think the most effort on that has been done by Scott, who I think just stood there for I don't know how many days.
Okay.
Because when he was in Pune, he told me about his labors in Siddharth Library. So I know about that. I didn't spend that much time there. I went to the Ambedkar collection, the small room. There I spent time because that's a selection.
Okay, there is another one, Mr. Patel, hai na? Doctor, please ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that talk. So, I find it amazing how certain individuals have taken on the burden of preserving his papers when the state has not. And you mentioned Survade, for example. And you mentioned in your talk about how, there's still a question of what will happen to these papers after these individuals pass on. In your work, did you discuss with them about the possibility of potentially donating it to a particular place? Do we have an increasing amount of interest in I think I unfortunately know the answer, but I would like to be hopeful. But have other institutions that, now we have so many new archives coming up in India, many of them private. Is there any place for these papers? Is there any interest that's been expressed in them, from these new places?
No, from the new places that I know of, they have not been approached. I am quite sure. They have not been, but there have been a lot of foreign scholars who have shown interest, obviously. I would say that in the, even if the family wants to keep the originals, fine, but let's at least photocopy it. And I mean, it can be done. It's not it's just that, firstly, as far as Mr. Surode is concerned, he is now himself working on a book and he says, look, you don't tell me to do all this. Somebody has to get around to it, and preferably, somebody who's, who knows the subject also, not just. So, and Mr. Ramesh Sinde's collection, people themselves have tried, because it was partly destroyed in the Bombay floods. That came in the newspapers also. So they have been telling him to shift that thing. And there are places now, there is a good place in Navi Mumbai where they can shift, there's air conditioning there and all that, the Ambedkar museum, this thing. But, these people are still holding on to their material. And I don't know. I mean, but they are aware of this. They are aware of this, but there has been no private this thing. And I would say if a important political leader takes the initiative, it can all happen. After all, they need assurance that this will be taken care of and proper credit will be given. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, you need right now the atmosphere is such that neither of these two conditions are being met. So that's what it seems to me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If there is,
thank you.
If there is any, please raise your hand if there is anyone else. Yeah, please. Yeah, upgrade. What is? Again, Ananya ji.
Hi.
Yeah. Yeah,
Hi,
please.
sorry. If nobody else is asking,
Yeah, please.
I'll ask, since I have so many questions, and nobody who can answer them. You said that you feel that, or that perhaps Ambedkar was never given his due, because he was critical of the national movement and he was critical of the Hindu religion. Now, in today's day and age, I think being critical of the Hindu religion is definitely a problem in terms of getting him the space that he ought to have. But for a long time, he has, in a sense, been recognized and promoted as a kind of national icon on account of his work for the Constituent Assembly and his work in drafting the Constitution. So from that perspective, you wonder why he was nevertheless neglected. And secondly, in today's day and age, with the current dispensation, when there's so much criticism being directed against, let's say, Nehru and Gandhi, and people like Savarkar are being, kind of rehabilitated in a sense, one would think that, counterintuitively, Ambedkar would also find his place in the sun as somebody who was, from the very get-go, critical of Gandhi, or had a kind of uncomfortable relationship with Nehru, right? So in a sense, he should also find a new constituency. I mean, even if it's not the kind of constituency we would like, but
but that
starting with building that big statue and all of this.
That
has been an attempt to appropriate him on the part of the Hindu right.
Yeah. No, that appropriation has been done and it will continue. And, because of the thinker like Ambedkar, who's not an academic, who was in politics, and all his writings and speeches are responses to certain situations.
Yeah.
So, you can easily pick, you'll get some things here and there, which you are thinking. So they have done this particularly with the Pakistan book. The Hindu right gets a lot there but the thing is, so this selective use has been done. And the selective use is there everywhere. But when you're talking of the archive, it means that we want everything to be there and it has to be made public. Then the other stuff has to also come. No?
Yeah.
And that is still, as you said, it is very difficult for many people to digest. In the sense, the controversies have happened when the books were first published. That's but, then it went away. But there is a whole generation of Indians who don't know about that controversy also. I mean, they have not read riddles in Hinduism. They don't know what it was about. They don't know about. So if they read it today, today that book cannot be published. I mean, if it was because it is Dr. Ambedkar's work, it can be republished. But if it was somebody else's work, it's not going to be published. And since today, if somebody were to write something like that, it's obviously not going to be published by anybody. So that part is they have how to deal with it. That part is so they ignore it. They just ignore it and they talk about the fact that he didn't get along with Nehru and he made critical comments on Muslim leaders. These are the two things that they recycle. And a few things else. There are a few standard stories, and this one, of course, that he and Savarkar were great friends. And there are such 3-4 kind of pieces that they just recycle. But there is a lot else that they will not take, and there is a lot else that anybody cannot take. In the sense, because after all, I will look at Ambedkar said for official language. First, he pitched for Sanskrit.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot for us also, which will be difficult to take. But then, in the sense, when you understand a thinker like that in all this dynamism, So you need all the materials. So yeah, so the selective appropriation is going to continue, and that has to be resisted and contested, and counter ones have to be created, and it has to be enriched also. Like I said, we can't just keep talking about Ambedkar. There are other people around him who also require more. More work needs to be done on them. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think there is no more question. Let's see.
Right.
There is one. Let's see. Who is? Yeah, Joe. I think this may be the last question. What is John? Huh? Yeah, John, please unmute yourself and ask your question. No.
Nishikant, don't you have some comments?
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
So can I be heard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. First, I want to just thank you very much for this book and for your hard work in this. I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm outside of India right now, and so I don't yet have access to the book, but it's a high priority for me to read. And I'm wondering if you could say, based on the people you've talked with, the people that you've worked with, the archives that you've visited, what role do you think there is for digital archives in collecting, managing, holding the materials that you've encountered, for preserving these materials?
Yeah.
I understand there's a lot of difficulty, especially with non-Indians being involved in questions of propriety and preservation and whatnot. But could you just say a little bit about that, and what role do you think the digital world might have?
Yeah, no, the digital world will, all the material available can be digitized and put, and some has already been digitized. For example, the Janta papers, which were in Masood Moon's collection, they were already been digitized in 2016. The thing is that, but however, it has not been printed so far and published. That is the way the government committee is working. But they could have okay, they didn't print it, so they could have put it up in a website. But so resistance is not about there is some technological barrier. The technology is all digitizable, and it can all be done by one a reasonably large software company can do all this in about 6 months. It's just a question of political will and somebody bringing all these people together and saying that let's forget all our internal differences and all that, and let's forget. And of course, it has to be done by a non-political kind of entity. I mean, with some political wishes that other people, everybody gets together. You need a sort of consensus effort for this. There is no technological barrier. All of this can be digitized, and some of it is already digitized. Like, for example, the letters in the National Archive, they are available for all of us. All of us can see it on the archives portal. So similar thing, the entire stuff can be put. I mean, writings and are there already, writings and speeches, but it can be made more user-friendly, more so that you can search for particular topics better chronologically and all that. So it can all be done. It's not a. I was asked recently when I went to Chennai that what do you think will be the ballpark figure and how much time will you take? There were some parties who are interested there, the organizers. So I just said, look, if we get 10 crores and in 2 years we can do all this. but anyway, 10 crores is not a big deal considering the amount spent on statues. Yeah. Yes, sir. Nishikant ji.
Yeah. Thank you. I really, on one side, I really enjoy your presentation, and it was very rich, descriptive. You have given a lot of details, and for the new scholars, it will be very useful that they can, for both ways, from where they can find the relative materials, and as well as you have suggested also that there are the places where work need to be done. But I still find that it was it could have been better if you have selected some theme and spoken, because your book is very rich and you have given a very detailed description of the Mahar Satyagraha, Parvati Temple Satyagraha, even Gandhi Ambedkar debate. So I think if you would have spoken, that would have benefit more. That's my impression, because it's look very it was for a researchers, because it's a research institutes, whatever you have said is, I think it's most of the things are known by our colleagues and friends. That was my just remark. If you want to say why you have selected to speak on the archive of Ambedkar in that way, you want to say something, otherwise you can take it as a comments, that's all.
No, I think it was very important to put it, for me itself, it was an effort to put what is all there. And my effort of this PPT, of making this PPT, this was just an occasion. Like I said, if somebody is interested and wants to put the money in and all that, so this would be the starting point for a building a proper digital archive. So it is, it ought all to be, everything is known about everybody, but putting things together in one place, and and talking about and in each one, as I said, one can go into why certain things have been concealed, like why the letters have been concealed, but there wasn't enough time for that, why the letters were not published for 20 years, so there wasn't enough time for that. Maybe in a future session we can have about how parts of the archive have been used, and how the parts of the archive which are reveal things which have not yet come out in public domain. So I thought it was important to give an overview, so that including the parts that required to be studied, because the fact is that otherwise what you see is that people are just writing the same thing again and again and again and again. For the last 20 years, the original Ambedkar scholarship has been very low. So, and it's not that there is not enough to do, there's a lot to do.
That's true. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think now we should call. So I like to thanks Ayodhya ji for helping this with technical things, Praveen ji, our director Professor Saran for allowing us, and our faculty members and those present here, and thanks Ashok Gopal ji for a wonderful talk. And we hope you will next time you will visit Delhi, and we will have your lecture here on seminar. Okay, thank you everybody. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.